The bells of St. Aldhelm's had not yet begun to ring, but Maximilian could already hear them in his bones. He stood at the tall window of the east wing, watching the first carriages crawl up the drive like beetles on a wet leaf. 3 hours until the ceremony. 3 hours until he would stand beside a woman he had met precisely 4 times and promise her the rest of his life. The thought did not fill him with joy. It did not fill him with anything, which was perhaps worse. His valet had laid out the wedding coat across the chair, ivory with silver thread. Everything in the room was prepared for a man who would walk through it shortly and become someone else entirely. The Duke of Renholm. Husband. The end of a question his grandfather had spent a long deathbed pressing into his hand like a coin. He turned from the window and saw it. A letter on the writing desk by the door, cream paper, sealed with red wax, tilted slightly against the silver inkwell, as though someone had set it down in a hurry. He frowned. His correspondence was always brought on the breakfast tray. Letters did not arrive in the dressing room. Letters did not arrive on his wedding morning at all, by his own standing instruction. Maximilian crossed to the desk in 3 slow strides. The wax seal bore no crest, just a smooth red disc, pressed with a thumb perhaps. He turned the letter over. The direction was written in a hand he did not recognize, looping and pressed deep, the ink slightly smudged at the corner. To His Grace, before the ceremony. Read this if you would know the truth. Read it before you stand at the altar. Burn it if you would prefer the lie. He read the words again. The bells had not begun, but his pulse had, a hard tap at the base of his throat. Truth. Lie. The melodrama of it should have made him laugh. It did not. A footman cleared his throat in the corridor. Maximilian moved without thinking, slipping the letter inside the breast of his shirt against bare skin. The wax cool, the paper crackling once. Yes? The door opened. His cousin Pellington leaned against the frame in his groomsman's coat. The bride's carriage has been sighted on the lower road, Max. 10 minutes out. Tell her I shall be down directly. Pellington studied him. You look like a man on his way to the gallows. Pellington. Yes, yes. His cousin retreated. The door closed. Maximilian stood very still. 10 minutes. He pulled the letter out. He should have set it on the desk. He should have rung for his valet. He had been raised on the principle that a duke does not make decisions in haste. That scandal is what happens to other men, because they read what they should not read. His grandfather had said it 1,000 times. Power is the discipline of not knowing what you do not need to know. He broke the seal. 2 sheets. The handwriting was the same on both. Careful, slightly slanted. A woman's hand, he was almost certain. He sat down on the edge of the chair where the wedding coat had been laid. He read. His face did not change, because his face had been trained from boyhood not to change. Not when his tutor caned him. Not when his father died. Not when his grandfather had gripped his wrist and made him swear. His face did not change, but his hand did. His hand began to tremble against the page, so that he had to set the letter down on his knee to steady it. Then he picked it up again, because what was written on it was not a thing one set down. It was about the bride. It was not about her in the way one might expect. It did not say she was unfaithful or that she had a lover hidden in a country house. He could have weathered any of those. They would have been almost a relief. What it said instead was something stranger, quieter, and far more dangerous. And he read it 3 times before he understood that he had not misread it the first time, because no part of him wished to believe it the first time. The second sheet was a list. Names, dates, places. A bank in Antwerp, a solicitor in Edinburgh, a child born in a village on the Welsh border the spring before last, and entered into the parish register under a name that was not the name he knew. The list was short. 12 lines. 12 lines was enough. At the bottom, the writer had added a single line of postscript in slightly different ink. If you marry her today, you will be marrying her brother's wife. Maximilian made a sound that was not quite a word. The bells had still not begun to ring. Somewhere on the lower road, a young woman in a dress that had cost 600 guineas was being driven toward this house. His brother-in-law, the letter said, had drowned in a coaching accident on the continent the previous autumn. The funeral had been small. Maximilian had attended, had stood in the rain at a chapel outside Bruges. He had been told the man had been her cousin. A distant cousin. He remembered the word distinctly because he had thought at the time how inadequate the word was for grief, how the woman beside him had wept as though the man had been more. He looked at the list again. The dates lined up. The dates lined up so cleanly that he wondered if his own eyes were deceiving him. The marriage in a village chapel on the Welsh border. The child entered in the register 4 months later. The death on the continent in autumn. The mourning period quietly observed. The engagement to the Duke of Renholm announced precisely 6 weeks after the mourning ended. The bells of St. Aldhelm's began to ring. Maximilian flinched. They were only the first call, the slow tolling that warned the village a wedding was forthcoming, but they entered the room like an accusation. He folded the letter carefully along its original creases. He folded the list. He pressed them together and held them flat between his palms, as though he could compress the truth back into the paper. Then he rose. He understood with a sudden quiet clarity that he could not marry her. He understood with the same clarity that he could not refuse to marry her, not in any way that did not annihilate her. To stand up at the altar and say no would be to publish the letter to half of England before the day was out. The truth, once levered, would crush a woman whose only crime, as far as he could yet judge it, was that she had loved someone before him and lost him in a way she could not openly mourn. The bells tolled the second call. There was a knock at the door, his valet's voice. "Your Grace? Her ladyship asks whether you are ready to receive." A moment more. He slid the letter back inside his shirt. He picked up the wedding coat. He put it on slowly. He fastened each button as if he were doing it for the first time and last. He looked once more at the man in the mirror and saw, perhaps for the first time in a great many years, that the face he had been trained to wear was not equal to what he now had to do. He went down. She was already in the hall when he reached the bottom of the staircase. Maximilian paused on the last step and used the half-second to look at her properly. She stood beside her father in the patch of light that fell from the high window above the door, wearing the traveling dress, not the wedding gown. She was thinner than he remembered. 7 weeks could not account for the change in her face. 7 months could not. Her eyes met his, and he watched her assemble the smile. He had never noticed before that she assembled it. He had taken it for shyness. Now, with the letter pressed against his ribs, he saw the way her lips moved into the shape of greeting a half instant before her eyes followed, and he understood that she had been performing for him from the first moment they had been introduced. "Your Grace." Her father bowed. Sir Alaric Hennaway was a small man, elegantly dressed, with the careful manner of a country baronet who had married up. "Forgive our early arrival. The roads were better than we expected." "You are most welcome, Sir Alaric. Miss Hennaway." "Your Grace." She curtsied, and as she rose, her eyes flickered past him to the staircase behind. A very small movement, the kind of glance one gives when one expects someone else to descend after. "My mother is in the morning room. Pellington shall escort you. Forgive me. I have a small matter to attend to. 5 minutes only." Sir Alaric blinked. It was not done, but a duke could do as a duke pleased. "Of course, Your Grace." The bride said nothing. She only looked at him, and now her smile had not quite finished assembling itself, and he saw something in her eyes he had not seen before. Not surprise, recognition, as though she had been waiting, since the moment her carriage had turned up his drive, for some small thing to go wrong, and had recognized the wrongness the instant it appeared. He bowed and left them. He walked the length of the gallery and went down the back staircase to the library, which was empty at this hour. He shut the door. He turned the key. He pressed his back against the wood. Then he opened his eyes, because he had perhaps 4 minutes, and crossed to the desk. He pulled the letter from his shirt. He read it again, the whole of it. And now that the first shock had passed, he read it for what it was rather than what it claimed. Because a man does not become a duke at 26 without learning that letters are weapons before they are documents. 3 things. First, the writer knew the household. The letter had been placed in the dressing room, not the breakfast tray. That meant a servant had carried it the last few yards, or a member of the family. Second, the writer knew the bride. The list of dates was specific in a way no rumor could be specific. Third, and here he paused, the writer had not given him a name. There was no signature, no demand. The letter said, "Read this if you would know the truth, and burn it if you would prefer the lie. And beyond that, ask nothing of him at all." A blackmailer would have asked. Rival would have signed. A jealous suitor would have written ugly and written long. This letter was none of those things, which left a category he did not at first wish to consider. The letter had been written by someone who was trying to protect her. To protect her by exposing her made no immediate sense, unless the writer believed that a marriage to him would be the worse fate. Unless the writer believed that she did not, in fact, wish to marry him, and could not be heard to say so, and needed someone to hear it for her. He thought of her face in the entrance hall, the smile assembled half a beat late, the flicker of her eyes past his shoulder, looking for someone who was not there, the recognition when he had set a small matter to attend to, as though she had known. He could not stand at an altar in 3 hours and say words he no longer trusted, and he could not refuse to stand at the altar without destroying her, which meant he had to find a third path, and he had until the noon bell to find it. There was a soft scratching at the door, not a knock, a scratch, the way someone scratches who does not wish to be heard knocking. He folded the letter swiftly into his coat. He rose. He unlocked the door. His sister stood on the other side of it. Cordis was 19 and small, and had never in her life been able to school her face into the kind of stillness their mother required of her. Today it was worse than usual. She did not say anything at first. She looked at him, and then she looked at his coat where the letter now lay against his ribs, and she said very quietly, "You read it." He closed the door. He turned the key. Cordis. I told her I would not. And then I sat up the whole night writing it 3 times, and the third time I burned the other 2, and put the third one on your desk, before the dawn, and I have hated myself for every minute of every hour since. You wrote the letter. Yes. How do you know any of this? Because she told me, Max. Because she has been my friend for 2 years. And 3 weeks ago she sat in my garden room and told me. Because she could not carry it any longer alone, and she made me promise I would not say a word. And I have not said a word. I have only written one. Her voice broke. I am breaking my promise. I do not know any other way to keep her from a worse one. He stared at her. His sister, who could not be trusted to keep a secret about a Christmas pudding, had carried this for 3 weeks. Sit down. I cannot sit. If I sit, I shall not stand again. Sit, Cordis. She sat. Tell me. All of it. We have until the noon bell. The bells of St. Aldhelm's told the third call. She told him. The bride's name was Aurel. He had used it perhaps a dozen times in his life. He had not known that Aurel had been raised primarily by an aunt in Pembrokeshire, because her mother had died young, and her father had been too occupied with his own attempts to remarry. He had not known that in the next valley over had lived a young man named Tobias Fenmere, the second son of a country gentleman, with no fortune and a habit of writing poetry that was not very good, and a face Aurel had loved since she was 16 years old. They were married in the chapel at Llandewi Velfrey 3 years ago this June, privately. Her aunt knew. His brother knew. No one else. They had hoped that if they presented it as a thing already done, her father could not undo it. They were wrong. He undid it. He had it set aside. There are ways, Max, when a woman is under 21 and her father has not consented. He had the marriage annulled within the year, and Tobias paid to leave the country, and Aurel. Cordis pressed her hand to her mouth. Aurel was already with child. Maximilian closed his eyes. The child is alive. He is alive. He is 2. His name is Linus. He lives with the aunt in Pembrokeshire, who is presented to the world as his grandmother. Aurel has seen him 3 times in 2 years. Her father permitted it on the strict condition that she submit herself to the next match he could arrange, and now to you. She agreed because each refusal cost her another month. She could not visit the boy, and because her father had threatened to have him sent to a tenant family in Nova Scotia if she defied him a 4th time. She agreed, Max, because she has not been a free woman since she was 19 years old. He had to put his hand on the shelf behind him to steady himself. Tobias, the continent. They told her he died last autumn, a coaching accident outside Bruges. She wore mourning that no one understood. Her father made her take it off after a fortnight. She was at the funeral. She told everyone he was a distant cousin. She held her father's arm because she could not stand without holding something. Cordis was crying silently. She has been a widow for 9 months and a bride for 8. And no one in this house knows but me, and now you. The postscript about her brother's wife. Under the law, the annulment was set aside. But under God, Max, she does not believe it. She has never believed it. She believes she is still Tobias's wife, and that he is still her husband, even now that he is in the ground. To marry you today, she would be doing it as a woman who already gave herself once and meant it. I wrote it the way I wrote it, because I needed you to understand. It is not a question of whether she loves you. She does not. She cannot. There is no room left in her for it. Maximilian came across the room. He sat down opposite his sister, knees almost touching hers. He took her hands. Cordis, look at me. You have done a brave thing. A foolish, impossible, brave thing. Do you hear me? Yes. Now listen. We have until the noon bell. After noon, the chapel fills. And after the chapel fills, the thing becomes public. I must speak to her. Alone. Properly. I cannot make any decision that touches her without her in the room. Can you arrange it? She was already thinking. The orangery. Mother has not been there in a fortnight because of the damp. I shall tell Aurel that I wish to show her the white camellia. We are friends. It is a thing friends would do. Good. Bring her there. Then leave us. Yes. Cordis, whatever you hear of it, I am not angry with you. Do you understand? Yes, Max. Go. She rose. She wiped her face on the back of her wrist in a gesture that was entirely childish and entirely hers. She slipped out. Maximilian sat where he was. Then he rose and crossed to the writing desk. He took out a sheet of paper and a pen, and he wrote in his own hand a very short note, 4 lines only, and he sealed it with his ring, and he placed it in the inner pocket of the wedding coat. He looked once at the wall above the desk, where his grandfather's portrait hung. The cold blue eyes turned slightly away. Power is the discipline of not knowing what you do not need to know. I'm sorry, sir, Maximilian said quietly. I find I need to know. He left the library. He had no plan. He had, instead, the certainty that whatever he did next, he would do it as himself, and not as the man his grandfather had carved out of him. It was perhaps enough to begin with. He turned the handle and went in. The morning room was full of the smell of beeswax and white lilies. His mother was holding the Sèvres teapot at the precise angle she used when she wished to remind the room that she had been pouring tea in great houses since before any of the present company had been born. Maximilian, we had begun to despair of you. Forgive me, Mother. A matter of correspondence. On the morning of your wedding, On the morning of my wedding. She set the teapot down. The Dowager Duchess of Renholm was 61 years old and looked 45, which was a feat she had achieved through severe self-discipline. Sir Alaric, Miss Hennaway. Aurel had risen at his entry. She curtsied. Her teacup was full and untouched. She had taken her gloves off and put them down on her lap and put her hands on top of them, palms hidden, in the way a woman does when she does not want a room to see whether her hands are shaking. Mother, I wonder whether I might trespass upon Miss Hennaway's patience for a quarter of an hour. There is a small matter of the chapel arrangement upon which I should like her opinion. Cordis has expressed a wish to show her the orangery. His mother's eyes flickered to him. A matter of the chapel. A small matter, Mother. 5 minutes. 5 minutes, she repeated. The phrase in her mouth was not agreement. It was a receipt. Sir Alaric was glad of any task that allowed him to pretend he had been consulted. Of course, Your Grace. Aurel rose, took up her gloves, and crossed the room. He followed her out. The corridor was empty. They walked the length of it together, not touching, his coat brushing once against her sleeve when they passed the long table on which the housekeeper had set out the urns of white roses. And at the touch, he felt her flinch, a small flinch, and he understood that she had been bracing for the whole walk. Cordis was waiting at the head of the orangery passage. I told her you wished to consult her on the camellia. Aurel, you must see it before the ceremony. The first bloom opened only this morning. She squeezed Aurel's hand once, and her eyes met Maximilian's. I shall be in the small parlor, if you have need. She withdrew. Maximilian opened the orangery door, and Aurel went in past him, and he came in behind her and shut the door, and they were alone in the long glass room with the smell of damp earth and citrus, and the white camellia trembling on its branch by the window. Miss Hennaway, Your Grace, I should like to speak plainly to you, more plainly than the morning warrants. Will you allow it? She turned her face very slightly away from him, toward the camellia. I have been waiting for someone to speak plainly to me for a long time. I should be grateful, Your Grace, if you would be the one to do it. He drew the letter out of his coat. He held it flat between his hands, and he watched her face. And he saw her look at the letter, and he saw her look at him, and he saw her understand, in the space of a single breath, that he had read it. She did not faint. She did not weep. She put one hand on the back of the wrought iron chair beside her, and she said, I see. How much of it? All of it. My sister wrote it. She did so without your knowledge. Her eyes closed. When they opened again, they were entirely awake, and he saw the woman she had been before she had been broken into the woman he had been introduced to. There was a hardness in her face that was not cruelty. It was the hardness of someone who has been counting the cost of her own silence for so long that she has come to know it down to the penny. I will not let her be punished. Whatever you intend to do, you must promise me that first. I have no intention of punishing her. I am, in some measure, in her debt. You are very calm, Your Grace. I'm performing calmness. There is a distinction. For the first time, something in her face moved, the recognition of one performer by another. Yes, I know the distinction. Will you sit? I have something to ask you, and I don't wish you to fall while I am asking it. She sat. He drew the 4-line note from his coat. Aurel. He used her name, because the time for Miss Hennaway had passed. I am going to tell you what I know. Then I am going to tell you what I propose. Then I am going to ask you what you want, and I am going to abide by your answer. We have until the noon bell. Yes. I know about Tobias Fenmire. I know about the chapel at Llandewi Velfrey. I know that your father had the marriage set aside, and I know the means by which he did it. I know about the boy, Linus. I know he is too. I know you have seen him 3 times in 2 years. She had begun to cry, quite silently. I know that you came to this house this morning as a woman, in mourning for a husband, No one is permitted to know you ever had. I know that you do not love me, and that you cannot, and that you have a child whose welfare your father holds as the price of your obedience. Have I misunderstood any part of it? No, you have understood it all. Then here is what I propose. He set the 4-line note on the small wrought iron table. I cannot marry you today. I shall not. I will not stand at an altar with you and require you to swear vows that you have already sworn and broken under duress and never in your own heart abandoned. I had not expected, when I came down the staircase this morning, to find that I had any principle left that I had not already been willing to sell to my grandfather's memory. But it appears I have one, and this is it. Your Grace, hear me out. If I refuse the wedding outright, you are destroyed. Your father will not survive the scandal politically, and will repay it on you. The boy will be sent to Nova Scotia within the fortnight. I am not willing to purchase my own honor at that price. Therefore, I propose the following. He drew breath. In 1 hour, you will be taken ill. The wedding will be postponed by 2 weeks on grounds of your indisposition. The bishop will be sent home. During those 2 weeks, you will remain a guest of this house. Your father will be permitted to see you in the presence of my mother only. I shall send a man I trust to Pembrokeshire to verify the boy's safety and remove him quietly to my own estate at Caer Idris in the north, where my old nurse is still alive. He will be safe there, whether or not you and I ever stand at an altar together. At the end of the fortnight, you will tell me what you wish to do. If you wish the marriage to proceed, I shall stand at the altar, and I shall ask of you only what you can freely give. If you wish it not to proceed, I shall break the engagement, publicly, and I shall take upon myself entirely the blame. The scandal will fall on me. It will not fall on you. I am, you may have noticed, in a position to absorb it. The orangery was very quiet. Aurel, look at me. She looked. There is a fourth condition, and it is the only one I shall require of you. Whatever you decide at the end of the fortnight, you must decide because you wish it. Not because of the boy. Not because of your father. Not because of me. The decision must be yours, and only yours, because I have lived 26 years inside a decision that was made for me before I could speak, and I am not willing to make one more woman live inside one. Do you accept those terms? She rose. She crossed the small space between them, and she stood in front of him, and she put one hand, very lightly, against the front of his coat, over the place where the letter had been, and she let it rest there for the count of perhaps 3 breaths. He did not move. She was confirming, by the pressure of one gloved hand, that the man in front of her was solid. I accept. Whatever else may come of this morning, Maximilian, I accept. She had used his name. He was so unused to hearing it from a woman who was not his sister or his mother that for a moment he could not speak. Then we have work to do. We have very little time. She drew her hand away. How shall I be ill? Cordis will know. Cordis has been ill in this house at strategic intervals since she was 9 years old. Trust her. The door of the orangery opened. Cordis stood in the threshold. Her eyes flicked from her brother to Aurel and back again. The bishop is at the gate. What followed was the strangest hour of Maximilian's adult life. Cordis put her arm around Aurel's waist with the easy intimacy of a friend and walked her toward the side staircase. And as they walked, Aurel's face changed, slowly, deliberately, with the controlled craft of a woman who had spent 2 years performing one feeling while another lived underneath. By the time they reached the foot of the staircase, she was pale. By the time they were halfway up, she was unsteady. Mrs. Halifax, Cordis was saying, in a voice raised exactly enough for the servants' hall to hear. Miss Hennaway has come over faint. The heat in the orangery. Fetch her woman. Fetch the salts. Send for Dr. Thring at once." The housekeeper, who had managed 3 weddings and 4 funerals in this house, did not waste a second on questions. Aurel was helped into the green guest chamber, and the door was shut. His mother appeared at his elbow. "Maximilian, what in God's name?" "Miss Hennaway has been taken ill, Mother. Cordis has called for Dr. Thring." "And the ceremony?" "Will of necessity be postponed. A fortnight, I should think. I shall write to the bishop within the hour. Sir Alaric will be—" He allowed himself the smallest pause. "Displeased." "Sir Alaric will be more than displeased. Sir Alaric will be managed." Her look went through skin and shirt and ribs, and stopped at whatever lay behind them. "Maximilian, what have you done?" "I have done what I judge necessary, Mother. You will tell me in time. I shall tell you what is required for you to know. No more, and not now." She drew breath. Then she nodded once, without warmth, and turned and walked toward the morning room. He went to write the letter to the bishop. He sealed it with his ring, and gave it to a footman with instructions to ride to the chapel directly. He wrote after that 6 other letters in rapid succession, to his solicitor in London, to his land agent at Caer Idris, to his old nurse, Mrs. Penrhys, who would have walked into the sea for him without asking why, to the rector of the parish in Pembrokeshire, to a man in Bristol whose name had been given to him 3 years before by a friend in the Foreign Office, with the suggestion that he was the kind of man one could send to verify a death on the continent without the matter ever appearing in any newspaper. The 6th letter said only, "I have need of you. Come at once." It was addressed to Conrad and Meyer, who had been Maximilian's closest friend at Cambridge. He sealed each letter. He gave them to his valet. It was 11:30. He went to find Sir Alaric. He found him in the small study, standing at the window with his hands behind his back and the rigid posture of a man who has been kept waiting. "Your Grace." "Sir Alaric, sit, sir. This will not be brief." Sir Alaric sat. Maximilian remained standing. "Your daughter is ill. The wedding is postponed by a fortnight. The bishop has been so informed. Your daughter shall remain in this house until she is recovered, in the care of my mother and my sister, with a physician in daily attendance. A fortnight. And in this fortnight, my daughter is to remain here, as my guest in the Green Chamber, with every comfort and every protection I can offer her. Yes, Your Grace, this is most irregular. It is irregular. A bride taken ill on her wedding morning is irregular. I should prefer, Your Grace, that my daughter return with me to Hennaway Park to recover. I do not doubt it. Nevertheless, she will remain here." It was said quietly. Sir Alaric heard it. He was not a stupid man. "There is one further matter, sir. I am sending a man tomorrow to Pembrokeshire." The color drained out of Sir Alaric's face. Pembrokeshire. For the purpose of ensuring the welfare of a child of 2 years, presently resident with his great-aunt in the village of Llandewi-Velfrey. I trust I do not need to elaborate. I should add that any communication you may have lately been considering with a tenant family in Nova Scotia is to cease at once. Should the boy be removed by your instruction before my man arrives, you will find me a man of an inventiveness in retaliation that you have not yet, sir, had occasion to observe. Your Grace, I have not finished. You will, in the fortnight to come, conduct yourself in this house with the mildness of a man whose daughter is gravely ill. You will speak to no one of any matter that touches upon Pembrokeshire, upon Llandewi-Velfrey, upon the late Mr. Tobias Fenmere, or upon the boy. If you do this, I shall continue to honor the engagement publicly until such time as my fiancée herself directs otherwise. If you do not, I shall break the engagement, on my own authority, with such a story attached to it, as shall keep your name out of every drawing room in the south of England for a generation. Do I make myself plain? Sir Alaric lowered his eyes. After a long moment, he nodded. "Plain, Your Grace. You will take a glass of wine. You have had an unhappy morning." He poured the wine himself. He set it at Sir Alaric's elbow. He did not again sit down. When he left the study, he stood for a moment in the corridor, with his hand on the handle, and he found that his own hand was steady. It had not been steady when he had broken the seal. It was steady now. He thought, with a strange small clarity, "I have just become my grandfather, and not become him, in the same hour." He went up the back staircase to ask, through the door, after the bride. The noon bell of St. Aldhelm's had not rung. It would not ring today. Conrad and Meyer arrived 3 days later. On a black horse, he had ridden hard along the post road from Cambridge. Max. Conradin. They embraced briefly, a stiff Cambridge embrace of two men who had loved each other for 10 years, in the manner of two men who had been raised never to say so. Conradin stepped back. "You look like a man who has not slept." "I have not slept." "Tell me everything," Maximilian told him. He told him standing at first, walking the length of the library. He told him the letter, and Cordis, and Aurel, and Sir Alaric, and the boy, and Tobias, and the man in Bristol, and the postponement, and the conversations in the orangery and the small study. He told him, too, the things he had not yet been able to say to anyone, that his mother had not spoken to him since Tuesday morning, except in the formal third person required at table, that Aurel had spent 2 of the 3 days genuinely unwell, the relief of having been heard collapsing her into a kind of fever, that Cordis had developed a slight tremor in her right hand that she was attempting to disguise. Conradin let him finish. He had the gift of not interrupting. "The man in Bristol," he said at last. "Edmund Sclater, Foreign Office. I was given the name 3 years ago. We shall not hear from him for at least 3 weeks. As for the boy, Mrs. Penrhys is already on her way. The aunt will go with him to Caer Idris. I shall not separate a child of 2 from the only mother he has yet known." Conradin studied him. "You are not asking me what I think of all this." "I know what you think of it. You think I have done a remarkable thing and a foolish thing in roughly equal measure. You think I have not yet asked myself what I want, and that until I do, I shall be operating on the principle of harm reduction, which is the principle of decent men in impossible situations, and is also the principle by which most decent men become unhappy ones. That is roughly accurate. What would you have me do? Exactly what you are doing. And I would have you understand, while you are doing it, that the question of what you want will not stay quiet for the fortnight. It is already coming for you, Max." Maximilian did not answer. He was thinking of the moment in the orangery when Aurel had laid her hand against the front of his coat. He had not described that moment to Conradin. He had described every other moment in detail, but not that one. "What you are not telling me," Conradin said, watching his face, "is whether you have begun to have feelings for the woman." "I have not." "Maximilian, look at me." He looked. "I have known you since you were 19 years old. I have watched you decline over 7 years to permit yourself a feeling that did not appear on a printed schedule of duties. The man who sat across from me 20 minutes ago describing a young woman's hand on his coat in an orangery is not a man who has not begun to have feelings. He is a man who has begun to have feelings and has not yet decided what to do with them. If he does not decide, he will permit them to make decisions for him in 3 weeks' time, and those decisions will not be as good as the decisions he is making now. What would you have me do? Speak with her. Not about the boy, not about the fortnight. Speak with her about herself. Begin to know her separately from the situation. Do not arrive at the end of the fortnight knowing nothing about the woman whose life you have undertaken to rearrange." Maximilian rose. He went to the window. "I am afraid that I have already begun to." "I know. I do not know how to do this. No one does. You did the right thing on Tuesday morning. You did it because something in you, despite everything, was still alive. Do not now manage it back into the silence your grandfather taught you. The next fortnight is not only her decision, Max, it is yours as well. Maximilian put his hand against the cold glass. And Conradin, thank you. His friend rose. He put his hand briefly on Maximilian's shoulder. He did not say anything in reply. He left to find Cordis. Maximilian crossed to the desk, and he opened the small drawer where he had placed his sister's letter and his own 4-line note. And he took them both out, and he carried them upstairs to his private cabinet, and he locked them in the iron box that had once held his grandfather's correspondence with Lord Liverpool. He sat down on the edge of the bed. He did not know what he wanted. He knew for the first time in his adult life that he was permitted to find out. The fortnight unfolded in a rhythm Maximilian had not known a household could possess. The great public machinery of the wedding had been dismantled within 48 hours. The cold luncheon eaten, the guests dispersed. The bishop returned to Salisbury with a private gift of port and a courteous lie. What remained was a house holding its breath. It was in that held breath that Maximilian first began to know her. He came to the door at 3 each afternoon. He stood in the corridor and asked, through the door, whether Miss Hennaway felt able to receive a visitor. And on the 3rd day, she said yes. And on every day after that, she said yes. And a chair was set for him by the fire in the small sitting room adjoining her chamber. They talked of small things at first. The weather at Caer Idris, the book she had been reading, a robin that had come to the windowsill on the 2nd morning and had returned each morning after, as though it had been engaged on a retainer. She had a quiet voice, lower than he had remembered. On the 4th afternoon, she said, "Will you tell me something? If I can. Why did your sister write the letter?" "Because she loves you, and because she had been carrying for 3 weeks a thing she could not carry, and because, I think, she knew that I was the only person in the world she could carry it to who would not destroy you with it. She trusted you to be that person. She trusted me to be the man she had hoped I would become. It is not the same thing. I am grateful, every hour now, that she was right, because she was guessing." The fire shifted in the grate. "She has spoken of you. Through the past 2 years. I had pieced together some idea of what she meant by you. You are not, I find, what she meant. That is alarming. Is it for the worse? It is for the more complicated." A small smile moved at the edge of her mouth. He had not seen her smile that way before. It was the smile of a woman testing whether smiling was a thing she was still permitted to do. "Tell me about Tobias." She looked up sharply. "You do not have to. I find I should like to know him, as you knew him. If he was a man you loved for years and have mourned for 9 months, then he is a part of the room we are sitting in, and I should rather know him than pretend I do not see him." She set the needlework down. "He wrote bad poetry. Cordis told me, as a kindness. I loved him because he laughed in the wrong places at the right things. He laughed at the village curate when the curate said something sanctimonious about the poor, and he laughed when his own horse threw him into a hedge. He had a laugh that was not, properly, a laugh. It was an unconcealment. He was a man who could not conceal himself. It was the worst possible quality for a husband whose marriage had to be hidden, and it was the reason, in the end, that the marriage was discovered. My father saw it across a room at a country assembly, and knew at once. I'm sorry. It was not your doing. No. But it has become, in some small portion, my responsibility." The light had begun to go out of the window behind her. "Maximilian, you must stop calling me Miss Hennaway. It has begun to make me feel as though I have committed a crime." "Aurel, will you tell me about the boy?" Her face did a small thing then. The careful arrangement she had been wearing for 2 years lifted, briefly, and the woman beneath it came up to look at him. "He is afraid of geese. He has decided geese are the worst thing in the world. My aunt has had to walk him a long way around the village pond every morning of his life. He calls them, he cannot quite say geese, he says gee-gees, which is very confusing because he calls horses gee-gees as well. So my aunt has been obliged to invent 2 different tones of voice, one for friendly gee-gees and one for terrible gee-gees, and Linus has accepted the convention and uses it himself with great gravity to distinguish them. He laughed. It was a real laugh, and it surprised him so completely that he raised his hand to his mouth as though to take it back. And Aurel laughed in turn, and for perhaps 15 seconds, the small sitting room contained 2 people who had forgotten, briefly, that they were the protagonists of a private catastrophe. I have not laughed in a long time. Nor I. Cordis tells me you have not laughed in 3 years. Cordis exaggerates. Cordis does not exaggerate about the things that matter to her. He did not have an answer to that. Aurel, you have 11 days yet. What I said in the orangery I shall keep, irrespective of anything that is said in this room. I understand you. You may stop saying it. He rose. He bowed. He left. Outside the door, he stood for a moment with his hand against the wall. He found that he was standing in a corridor in his own house with the unfamiliar physical sensation of a heart that had remembered what it was for. He went in again. Every afternoon at 3, for the 8 days that followed. They talked of poetry, of horses, of her aunt's village. They talked of Cordis and of his mother, and once, briefly, of his father, the late Duke, whom Maximilian had not spoken of aloud to anyone in 3 years. He spoke, slowly, of a man who had loved his wife so visibly that his court at St. James's had thought him a fool, and Aurel listened with the quietness of a woman who recognized the shape of what was being described. On the 11th evening, he stood at the long window of the east wing, and he understood, with a clarity he had been postponing, that Conradin had been right. He had begun to love her. It was not the loud thing he had been raised to believe love was. It was a quiet thing. It was the small lift of pleasure when the door opened at 3. It was the way her face had opened when she had told him about the geese. He did not know yet that 2 floors below him, in the green chamber, a woman who had not loved any man but Tobias Fenmir in 7 years, was sitting at the small writing desk with a sheet of paper before her on which she had written, in her own hand, Maximilian, I do not know how to begin this letter. The letter from Bristol arrived on the morning of the 12th day. It came in a plain envelope, in a plain hand, with no seal. Maximilian carried it, unopened, into the library, and he closed the door behind him, and he locked it, and only then did he sit down and break the wafer. The letter was 3 pages long. Edmund Sclater had a good hand and a better mind. He set out the matter in numbered paragraphs. He had reached Bruges. He had located the parish in which the coaching accident had been reported. He had spoken with the priest, with the innkeeper, and with 2 of the men who had been charged with recovering the bodies. Tobias Fenmir had not died in the coaching accident. Tobias Fenmir had been reported to have died. The report had been entered by the consul himself into the official register on the strength of a single witness statement, which witness had subsequently left the city. The body that had been buried under Mr. Fenmir's name had been examined, post-mortem, by a Belgian surgeon who had been paid, in cash, by a representative of Sir Alaric Hennaway. Tobias Fenmir himself had been, on the day of the accident, in a private lodging house in Antwerp. He had been there ever since. He was alive. He was destitute. He was unwell. Sclater had, by careful arrangement through an intermediary, confirmed his presence without revealing himself. Maximilian read the letter through twice. He read it a 3rd time. He laid it down. Sir Alaric had purchased a death. He had purchased it because a living Tobias Fenmir was an obstacle to the engagement of his daughter to the Duke of Renholm. He had not, however, killed him, either out of a residue of something resembling decency, or out of fear of the gallows, or most probably, out of the calculation that a death procured by certificate was cheaper and quieter than a death procured by hand. Tobias had been told, presumably, that the certificate was the price of his continued life. Aurel did not know any of this. She had been a widow for 9 months, who was not a widow. He could keep the letter. He could lock it in the iron box. He could go upstairs at 3. Aurel would never know, and Tobias would die, in time, in the lodging house, and the certificate would become the truth. He could keep the letter, and his life would be the life he had begun to want, and the only price would be a man he had never met, and a woman's right to know what was true about her own husband. He stood up. He put the letter in the inner breast of his coat, and he went out of the library, and he climbed the back stairs, and at the door he did not stop. He knocked once. He heard her voice. He went in. She was at the writing desk. She turned and saw his face and rose immediately. "Maximilian, what has happened?" "Sit. Please." "I don't wish to sit." "Aurel, sit." She sat. He drew a chair. He sat opposite her. He took the letter from his coat. He held it flat between his hands, exactly as he had held the first letter in the orangery. "I sent a man to Bruges on the day of the postponement. The letter has come this morning. Aurel, Tobias is alive." She did not weep. She did not move at all. "Where?" "Antwerp, a lodging house. He has been there since the autumn. He is unwell. The death was bought by your father. The body buried in the chapel outside Bruges was a stranger's. Tobias was told, I believe, that the certificate was the price of his continued life. He has kept his side of the bargain." She closed her eyes. He let her close them. After a long time, she opened them. "You were telling me this instead of keeping it from me." "Yes. You understood, before you came up the stairs, what telling me would cost you." "Yes. You came up the stairs anyway. Why?" "Because I love you. And because love that is purchased by a lie is not love. It is a different thing wearing love's coat, and I have worn enough coats that did not belong to me. I came up the stairs, Aurel, because I would rather lose you, knowing the truth, than keep you at the price of your not knowing it." He stopped. He had not, he realized, intended to say, "I love you." It had simply been the first thing in the answer. "What do you propose?" "I propose that you decide. Again. As you decided on the first morning. But this time with the full information. I shall send Sclater back to Antwerp tonight to bring Tobias to England, at my expense, under my protection. From that point, the choice is yours. If you wish to go to him, you will go to him. If you wish anything else, you will tell me, and I shall do as you direct. I have not said I love you in order to wait your decision. I have said it because it is true." She rose. She crossed to the window. She stood with her back to him for a long while. When she turned, her face was wet, but her voice was steady. "You must send for him. At once. Tonight, if it can be done. It can be done. And you must allow me, Maximilian, the next 3 days. As we agreed. I shall give you my decision on the morning we agreed. You will not come at 3 this afternoon. You will not come tomorrow either. You will come on the morning of the day I promised. And you will come not knowing, Maximilian. Will you bear it?" "I shall bear it." "Thank you." He bowed. He left the room. He went back to the library. He wrote the second letter to Sclater in 3 minutes and gave it to a writer within the half hour. He went after that to the South Orchard, and he walked the length of it twice, and on the third length he stopped beneath the apple tree his sister had once fallen from, and he put his forehead against the bark of it, and he stood there with his eyes closed, and he understood that he had just done the best thing he had ever done, and that the doing of it might cost him everything he had begun to want. He understood also that he would do it again. For 3 days, the house held a different silence than it had held before. Cordis, who had not been told the contents of the Bristol letter, nevertheless intuited that the mortar of her brother's careful structure had begun to set, or to crack, and she did not know which. She did not press. Conradin had returned to Cambridge on the 8th day, for a college matter that could not be deferred. He had written from the road. Whatever you decide, you have already done the difficult part. The rest is only practice. Maximilian did not go up at 3. He kept to the library and to the South Orchard. He would sit at the desk with a tenancy schedule and discover, after 20 minutes, that he had not read a line of it. On the evening of the second day, his mother came to the library. She had not knocked. She had simply come in and shut the door, and stood for a moment looking at him as though she were taking an inventory. Maximilian, you have done a thing that has confused me. I have spent a fortnight attempting to be furious with you, and I have failed. I have failed because I have known you since you were laid in my arms at 3 hours old, and I don't know the face you have been wearing in this house for 3 weeks. It is not your father's. It is not your grandfather's. I have come to ask you, before I am too proud to ask, whose face you have begun to wear. He had not, in 26 years, heard his mother speak this way. The asking had cost her something. Mother, sit. Please. I shall not sit. Then I shall stand. He rose. I cannot tell you everything. Some of what has happened isn't Aurel's. I shall not betray her confidence. I shall understand whatever you tell me, Maximilian. Then I shall tell you this. The morning of the wedding, I learned a thing about Miss Hennaway that I could not, that no honorable man could, proceed past in good conscience. I learned it from a letter I was not intended to read. I went to her in the orangery before the ceremony. I told her what I knew. I offered her a fortnight and a choice, and my protection while she made it. The fortnight is now within 3 days of its end. I do not know what her decision will be. And what is your own desire? He looked at his mother for a long moment. I love her. I had not expected to. I had not believed myself capable of it. I love her, and I am, at this moment, attempting not to permit my loving her to wait the choice she is making. His mother did not speak for some time. Then she crossed to the chair opposite his and sat down in it, slowly, as though her knees had decided for her without consultation. Your father loved me. Yes. He loved me visibly. It made him an inferior duke and a superior man. I have spent 40 years wishing he had loved me less, and I have spent the 3 years since his death wishing I had not wished it. He died, not knowing whether he had been loved by me. I have lived with that fact for 3 years, and I have not yet found any version of myself that can carry it without flinching. He did not interrupt. I have been a poor mother to you in this matter. I see now that I have been wrong about a great many things for a great many years. I am too old to repair most of them. I am not too old to repair this one. If the young woman upstairs decides to be your wife, I shall give her my blessing. If she decides otherwise, I shall give you my blessing in the matter of whatever you do next. Mother, there is one further thing. Your grandfather made you swear something on his deathbed. I don't know what it was. I was not in the room. I have wondered, for 7 years, what he extracted from you in that hour, and I have never asked. I am asking now. He could not speak. Tell me what he made you swear, and then we shall consider, together, whether you are still bound. He sat down. He made me swear that I would not marry for love. He said love had ruined his son. He made me swear, in his hand on my wrist, that I would marry for advantage. He held my wrist until I had said it 3 times. You were 19 years old. I was 19 years old, and I was alone with him, and he was dying, and I would have sworn anything he asked. I have spent 7 years inside that oath. And on Tuesday morning 3 weeks ago, I broke it. I broke it in the library before I knew I had broken it. I broke it again in the orangery. I have been breaking it every afternoon at 3 for 11 days, and I did not know, until this evening, that the breaking was what I was doing. His mother sat very still. Then it is done. Let it be done. He is dead. He has been dead 7 years. He cannot hold your wrist. Let the oath go. It is enough that you kept it for 7 years. It is enough that you broke it for the right reason. He nodded. He could not speak. She rose. She came around the hearth. She put her hand, briefly, against the side of his face, a gesture she had not made since he was 9 years old. And she said, "I shall go up tomorrow. I shall sit with her, if she will have me. It is what I should have done a fortnight ago." She left. He went up to bed. He slept, for the first time in 3 weeks without dreaming. In the morning, the third day of Aurel's renewed silence, a horse came up the drive at dawn. The rider was a man Maximilian did not recognize. He carried a single letter, sealed in plain wax, and he had ridden through the night from the south coast. He gave the letter to the footman. He did not wait for a reply. The footman brought the letter to Maximilian in the breakfast room. He took the letter. He looked at the seal. He looked at the hand on the direction. He did not, at first, recognize the hand. And then, quite suddenly, he did. Because he had seen it once, years ago, at the bottom of a piece of execrable poetry that had been included as a curiosity in a parcel of letters his sister had once shown him without explanation. The letter was from Tobias Fenmir. He sat down. He did not open it. He thought with perfect clarity, "I cannot read this letter before I see her. To read it would be to bring her the contents of it without her permission. She is upstairs. She has been writing her decision for 2 days. I do not have the right to alter it without her consent." He took the letter. He went up the staircase. He went directly to the green chamber, and he knocked, and Aurel's voice said, "Come." He went in. She was at the writing desk. She had finished her letter. It was folded, sealed with a plain wafer. She turned and saw his face, and rose at once. "Maximilian, what is it?" "This came an hour ago, from the south coast, by private rider. I have not opened it. It is in his hand. I will not open it without you. I am putting it in your hand. You will tell me what you wish to do." She did not move at first. Then she crossed the room. She took the letter. She looked at the hand on the direction. Her own hand began to tremble. She broke the seal. She read. He saw her read it once. He saw her read it a second time. He saw, on the third reading, the slow rearrangement of every feature, in the way light rearranges a room when a curtain is drawn back. Maximilian. He is in England. He is at an inn at Lyme Regis. He has been there 5 days. He arrived before your man could reach Antwerp. He came on his own. He has been ill, and he has been hidden, and he has been in mourning, in his way, for me. He has written this letter, he says, because a man in Bruges came to him and told him a duke had been making inquiries about his death, and she stopped. He has written to ask my permission to be alive. He did not know what to say. He has written to release me. He says he has thought about it for 9 months, and he has decided that I should not have to choose him a second time. He says I chose him once, when I was 19, and I should not be obliged to choose him again at 22. He says he has signed papers. Maximilian. She could not finish. He crossed the room. He took the letter from her hand, and he set it on the desk. He stood in front of her. "Aurel, look at me. Is he safe?" "Yes. The priest at Lyme Regis knows. He has a place to stay. He says he wishes, in time, to see Linus. He does not ask anything more of me than that. Then, Aurel, then, I have to go to him, to see him. Once. Not as his wife, as the woman who was his wife. To say to him, in person, the thing he has just said to me. To finish the thing he has begun. Yes. You will let me. You do not require my permission. I shall arrange the carriage. I shall come with you as far as the inn at Lyme Regis, and not a step further. I shall wait for as long as you require. Maximilian, I have written you a letter. I had finished it. It is on the desk. I had decided, before this morning, before Tobias's letter came. I had decided 2 evenings ago, and I have spent 2 days writing the decision down because I could not, the first night, find the words. I want you to read it now. I want you to know what I had decided when I didn't yet know he was alive. She picked up the letter from the desk. She held it out to him. He took it. He broke the wafer. He read. The letter said, "Maximilian, I do not know how to begin this letter, so I shall begin it as you have taught me, by telling the truth. I love you. I had not known it was love at first, because I had not known that love came in this quietness. I had known only the louder kind. I know now. I have known it since the afternoon I told you about the geese. I have not said so before now, because I was a widow, and could not say so, and because I was a woman whose decisions had been made for her for 2 years, and had not yet learned how to make one of her own. I am making one now, if you will have me, when the fortnight ends, knowing what you know, and knowing what I am, and knowing that I shall always carry, in some quiet room of myself, the man I loved when I was 19. I shall be your wife. I shall be your wife, not because of the boy, and not because of my father, and not because of the protection of your name. I shall be your wife because you came up the stairs on the morning of the 12th day with a letter you could have kept. I shall be your wife because you broke an oath I did not know you had sworn. Yours, if you will have me, Aurel." He did not raise his eyes from the letter for a long time. When he did, she was watching him. "To Lyme Regis," he said hoarsely. "First, then the rest of our lives, in that order." "In that order." He held out his hand. She took it. They reached the inn at Lyme Regis on the evening of the second day. The landlord showed them up to 2 rooms on the first floor, adjoining, with a small parlor between. He had said to her that morning, "I shall not come into the room with you. I shall be in the parlor. If at any moment you wish me, I shall come." She had said only, "Thank you." Tobias was in a small room at the end of the corridor. Aurel went to him at 7:30, when the dishes had been cleared, and Maximilian sat in the parlor with a book he was not reading, and a cup of tea he was not drinking, and the door across the corridor closed with a soft click that Maximilian heard through 2 walls. He did not move. He sat for what he was later told had been an hour and 20 minutes. He did not look at his watch. He sat with his hands folded in his lap and listened to the small sounds of the inn, the clink of glass below, a dog barking somewhere along the harbor, the slow tick of the parlor clock. The door across the corridor opened. He heard footsteps, light and uneven, and then the parlor door opened. Aurel came in alone. She closed the door behind her. She stood with her back against it. Her face was wet. She was not distraught. She was only spent. "Maximilian, he would like to meet you. Now. He says he will not sleep tonight unless he has seen you. He says he wishes to thank you, in person, for the courtesy of having sent a man to verify his death." He rose. "I shall go now. He is not what he was. You should know. He's very thin. He has a cough. The journey has not been kind. I'm prepared." He went out, and along the corridor, and at the door he stopped, and he put his hand on the wood for a moment, before he knocked. He knocked. "Come." He went in. Tobias Fenmir was sitting in a chair by the fire, wrapped in a blanket. His face was thin to the bone, and his hair, which had once been the color of dark honey, had thinned at the temples, in the way illness thins a man's hair before it has had time to gray it. He was perhaps 31 years old. He looked older, and at the same time strangely younger, as though sickness had pared away the layer of self-presentation a man accumulates through his 20s and left only the boy beneath. He rose when Maximilian came in. It cost him something. Maximilian gestured for him to sit. "Mr. Fenmir, Your Grace, Tobias, if you will permit. We are not, I think, on the footing of titles tonight. Tobias, then? Will you sit, sir? Maximilian sat. I am glad to meet you. More glad than I had expected to be. Tobias looked at him for a long moment. You have a face, Maximilian, that is more honest than I had been led to expect from a duke. I have been told as much in recent weeks. It is a new development. A small laugh from Tobias that turned, halfway through, into a cough. He raised a handkerchief and pressed it against his mouth, and when he lowered it, Maximilian saw, briefly, that there was the smallest stain of red along the cotton, and looked away. I shall not keep you long. Aurel has told me what you have done, the shape of it. I should like to say to you, sir, 3 things, and then I should like to release you to her. Say them. First, I owe you my life. The contact your man Sclater spoke to in Antwerp passed word, in language they understood, that an English duke now knew my name. The men in the lodging house who had begun to ask after my health, for reasons I do not need to describe to you, left me alone. They will continue to leave me alone, sir, because of you. I shall not forget it. Maximilian could not for a moment speak. Second, I have signed papers. The priest at the chapel along the harbor has them. They release Aurel, in such form as the law of England can release a woman whose marriage was annulled before it could be honored. I have signed them, not because I do not love her. I have loved her, sir, every day since I met her, and I shall continue to love her every day for as long as I draw breath, which I do not, on the medical evidence, suppose to be very many more years. I have signed them because love, after a certain point, is not the asking of things. Tobias, third, the boy. I should like in time to see him. Not soon. Not while I am as I am. Whatever you and Aurel decide regarding the boy, I shall not contest. The boy is hers, and he is yours, if you will have him. I should like only, when he is older, to be permitted to write to him, as an old friend of his mother's, without further claim. Maximilian found that his face was wet. You will be permitted to do more than write. You will be permitted to know him. You will be permitted to know him as the man who held his mother first, and held her well, and gave her up because you understood, in a coastal lodging house, what most men do not understand in 70 years. He will know who you are. He will know what you did. He will be told, when he is old enough, that he had 2 fathers in succession, and that the first of them was the better man. I shall not have him grow up not knowing what you were. Tobias closed his eyes. For a moment Maximilian thought he had fainted. Then he saw the steady rise and fall of the blanket, and he understood that Tobias was simply receiving, with his eyes closed, what he had not expected to be given. You are not what I had prepared myself for. Few of us are, Tobias, in this story. She has chosen you, then. She has. Good. I had hoped. She made the choice before she knew you were alive. She has made it again, knowing. She is in the parlor now. I should like, with your permission, to go to her. Go. Maximilian rose. He held out his hand openly to the seated man. Tobias took it. His grip was thin, but it was firm. They held the grip for perhaps 3 seconds. Then Tobias released it. Maximilian, take care of her. On my life. He went out. He did not, in the corridor, trust himself to walk straight. When he opened the parlor door, Aurel was standing at the window, with her back to him, and she did not turn at first because she had heard the door, and she was, he understood, allowing him a moment. He crossed to her. He stood behind her. Aurel. Yes. It is done. He has signed papers. He has given his blessing. He has thanked me of all things. He has asked in time to be permitted to know the boy, and I have promised him he shall. She turned. She put her hand against the front of his coat, exactly as she had done in the orangery on the morning of the wedding, and this time she did not lift it away. Maximilian, take me home. He drew her in. He held her in the small parlor of an inn at Lyme Regis, while the harbor lamps flickered along the seawall and the tide came in beneath the window, and a man 2 rooms away wrote, in shaky hand, the first of what would in time be 3 letters a year to a boy he would meet when the boy was 8, in the gardens at Cair Idris, and would teach to skip stones across the lake, and would die when the boy was 11, in a sunlit room with the boy's mother and the boy's stepfather sitting on either side of the bed. But that was years in the future. And in the present, Maximilian held the woman he loved and understood, at last, that he had come up the staircase 3 weeks ago for this. For her. For the small, steady weight of her against his chest, in a strange room above a strange harbor, and for the long road home in the morning, and for whatever the rest of their lives would be, which he understood now. For the first time in his life, he had been given the right not to know in advance. The wedding took place 6 weeks later, in the chapel at St. Aldhelm's, on an afternoon in late November, when the light came through the south windows in the slow gold of the year's last warm hour. There were fewer guests than there would have been on the original morning. The parish rector read the service in a voice that wavered slightly at the vows. The bride wore a dress of soft cream silk that had not been the dress prepared for the original wedding. She had refused that dress, gently, and the new one had been finished in 3 weeks. She walked up the aisle on the arm of Conrad and Meyer. Sir Alaric Hennaway was, on the afternoon of his daughter's wedding, in his own house at Hennaway Park, alone, having received from Maximilian 4 weeks before a letter that had caused him to dismiss 3 servants and remain indoors for the remainder of the year. He was not invited to the wedding. He was not, by Aurel's quiet decision, ever invited to Cair Idris, where the new Duchess of Renholm made her first home, and where her son, brought north in a closed carriage by Mrs. Penrhys at the end of the 2nd week of the postponement, was waiting for her on the day she arrived. There were 4 people in the front pew, the Dowager Duchess of Renholm, in a dress that was lavender, no longer but a clear, soft gray, the first color that was not mourning that she had worn in 3 years. Cordis, in pale rose, with her right hand entirely steady, which she had been working on for a fortnight. Mrs. Penrhys, the old nurse, with the boy Linus on her lap, who was wearing a blue velvet coat, and was, with great solemnity, holding a small posy of white camellias, which his mother had given him at the chapel door, with the instruction that he was to hand it to her when she reached the altar. He did so, when she reached the altar, with such care that the rector paused in the service to wait for him. The 4th person was Tobias Fenmere. He sat at the end of the pew, in the chair Maximilian had ordered placed there. He was thinner than he had been at the inn, but the cough had improved with 3 weeks at the small house in Devon Maximilian had quietly arranged. He had asked, when the wedding date was settled, whether he might attend. He had said he would understand if he could not. Aurel had asked him to come. When the rector reached the line of the service in which he asked whether any person knew of any just impediment, Tobias smiled, very slightly, into the gold of the south light, and put his hand on the boy's small head, where it rested, briefly, against his knee, and said nothing. The service ended. The newly wedded Duke and Duchess of Renholm walked down the aisle together. The dowager wept, very quietly, into a square of cambric. Cordis caught her brother's eye as he passed, and grinned, with the radiant, ungovernable grin she had worn at the age of 9, when she had successfully smuggled a kitten into the schoolroom, and Maximilian thought, in the small, dazed clarity that comes upon a man at the door of his own future, I have been raised by my grandfather to be a man like him, and I have failed at it, and I am grateful, and the failure has cost me only my unhappiness. They went out of the chapel into the November light. It was 9 years later that Aurel, going through the iron box in her husband's private cabinet on the day after his 35th birthday, found the 3rd letter. She had been looking for something else. She lifted out his sister's wedding day letter. She lifted out the letter from Bristol. She lifted out the 4 lines Maximilian had written in the library on the morning of the original wedding. Beneath these was a folded sheet she had not seen before. She unfolded it. She did not at first recognize the hand. Then she did. It was her own handwriting, from 9 years ago, the letter she had finished on the morning of the day of decision. She had not seen it since. He had folded it once, and folded it again, and locked it in the box, and had not, she understood now, looked at it in 9 years. She read it. She read the line that had been the most difficult line for her to write. I shall be your wife because you came up the stairs on the morning of the 12th day with a letter you could have kept. She set the letter down. She sat in her husband's chair for a long while. He came in some while later. He had been with Linus, who was now 11. He saw at once from her face what she was holding. He came around the desk, and he took the chair opposite, and he waited. You kept it. I kept all of them. This one most of all. You have not looked at it. I have not needed to. I knew what was in it. I knew when you handed it to me. She looked at him across the desk. I have a thing to ask you, Maximilian. On the morning of the original wedding, when you came down the stairs the second time and went into the morning room, what did you decide in that moment that you have not yet told me? He did not answer immediately. I decided that whatever happened next, I would do it as myself, not as the man my grandfather had raised me to be. I had been the other man for 19 years. I had decided in the library, before I came down, to stop. I came into the morning room having stopped. You were the first person I met as the man I was going to be. I have, since that morning, been that man with everyone. But I was that man with you first, and I do not think the rest would have been possible if you had not been the first. She rose. She came around the desk. She put her hand, lightly, against the front of his coat. It was the third time. She had made it once in the orangery. She had made it once in the parlor at Lyme Regis. She made it now. He covered her hand with his own. He did not, this time, draw her in. He simply held her hand against the place where the letter had been, and where the letter from Bristol had been, and where she herself, by the testimony of 19 years of him still to come, was. Beyond the window, the November light went down on the lake at Caer Idris in the slow gold of the year's last warm hour, much as it had once gone down on a chapel at St. Aldhelm's 9 years before, and would, in another November 3 years on, slant across a small sunlit bedroom in Devon, in which a man would be permitted to die, 3 years late, with his old wife's husband holding one of his hands, and his old wife holding the other, and his son, for the boy had grown up calling him his other father, and the having of two had not divided him, but doubled him, sitting at the foot of the bed, reading aloud from a book of bad poetry. But that was 3 years in the future, and in the present, the new Duke and the new Duchess of Renholm, who were no longer new, who were now the older generation of a house in which a great deal had been quietly and permanently rearranged, sat in the slow gold light, and did not speak, and did not need to. Thank you for being here. You stayed for the whole of this story, and I want you to know I felt you stay. You stayed through a wedding morning that did not become a wedding, through a fortnight in a house holding its breath, through an inn at Lyme Regis, where 2 good men did the hardest thing 2 good men can do, which is to stand aside and let a woman choose. You stayed, because you understood, by the end, what Maximilian and Aurel had already understood, that love that knows the truth is a kinder thing than love that does not. I write these stories because I believe certain old questions are still the only questions worth asking. What do we owe a stranger whose life we have stumbled into? What do we owe a person who loved someone before us and lost them and has not stopped carrying them? What do we do when we discover, on the morning of the most important day of our lives, that the time has come, very late, to begin writing our own story? If a particular line stayed with you tonight, Cordis at 3 weeks, or Tobias at the inn, or the moment in the library with his mother, I would love to know which one and why. Tell me in the comments. I read them. If this is the kind of story you would like more of, quiet stories, stories that take their time, stories about people who choose, in the end, to do the harder thing because the harder thing is also the truer one. Please consider subscribing. Thank you again for the gift of your hour, for the gift of your attention, which is the most valuable thing you own and which you spent, tonight, on a man who opened the wrong letter, and the woman whose life he chose to honor rather than to take, and the small gold light that was waiting all along on the other side of the morning. Until next time.